we've lived on, well, Sue's lived on Chautauqua Lake her whole life, and I've lived on Chautauqua Lake. My parents bought property at Lighthouse Point in about 1950, 51, something like that. And so my younger brothers, Bruce and Craig, spent summers with my mother at Lighthouse Point. I was working by the time it got settled. We've known the lake. My dad had boats, and we had boats, and you know, all that sort of thing. So Sue and I met in the fall of, well, winter, I guess, of 1957. We graduated from our respective high schools in 1956. Anyway, so then I was substantially more involved on the Bemis side of the lake than I had been at the Lighthouse Point side, because Dick Evans had boats, and unlike my dad, who wouldn't let anybody touch his, Dick let everybody touch theirs. And I think neither strategy worked particularly well, because both of them had boat problems with time. But anyway, so I really got to know the lake then. And then when we got married and after graduating from Hope in 1960, and went to the University of Kansas. And during the first summer, it was a question of whether or not I would stay at Kansas and do research or come home. So I came home, and Dick got me a job, because at that point he was the chairman of the board of supervisors. So he got me a job working on the lake patrol with Andy Travis and some guys like that. And we rode around the lake trying to catch people that were going without life preservers and skiing in wrong areas and all that sort of stuff. It was a great summer. So then that summer I got to know the lake pretty intimately. We bought our house, which is the house we have now, in 1990, but all along we had been, to the extent that we could be, had been part of the Lake Chautauqua community. Essentially, I've been on Lake Chautauqua, or Chautauqua Lake, in every capacity. I've skied in the same spot that I've water skied and snow skied. Right now we could snow ski out in the middle where we water ski in the summertime, right? Go from Long Point to our house. Done that often, right? So how did I get interested in the lake? It was just there. Now, it's had multiple problems over the years. One year, not too many long years ago, there was a huge carp infestation. Maybe you remember it. I thought that was terrible, but it sort of was treated by the community as being just part of life, I guess. Maybe you remember it differently, but that's certainly the way I remember it. But then what happened was that I started getting, this is just bringing up to the present. Then I had a chance after I left Bowling Green to spend some time, quality time, at Bemis. Well, then came along Jim Warefoots and Jim Service, and those guys know what they're doing. And I listened to these guys, and Tom Erlandson's another one. And I thought, these guys are really smart. These are the kind of guys, you know, they're in my comfort zone, right? Warefoots particularly. I mean, he is so organized. And I mean, just incredibly organized person. So relative to the Betty Sheldon sitting in my front yard with a load of weeds, somebody saying, well, herbicides are important. We'll use them, and maybe we'll make things better. So then I did some checking. You know, it's the philosophy that I think pertains to anti-herbicide people. And that is, you know, you don't not take penicillin because you don't believe in taking organic chemicals. If you get a bacterial infection, you're not going to get over it. You're going to die like Calvin Coolidge's son did, unless you take the antibiotics, which have been devised and found and whatever else for that. And the same thing pertains to herbicides. There's all sorts of data from Wisconsin particularly, but also in New York, which talk about the lack of toxicity to various small animals and whatever else. So, okay, so I got involved, and these guys are really smart. I keep telling them, power to the people. So what do? They go to the towns and they go to the villages and they convince them that, you know, we don't need to, we're not spending any money, we're all volunteers. we want to use herbicides in your section of the lake. And then they test it. So they tested it in Bemis Bay and it worked very well. And then they tested it the second year and it worked really well. So then everybody around the lake, on the south end particularly, sees that and they identify with it, okay? So I say these are winners and I want to associate with them. And if they want to use my professional resume to do that, I'm happy to have that happen, okay? I'm happy to talk about the organic chemistry of 2,4-D too, if anybody's not totally turned off as soon as they talk about it. But the bottom line is that I identified with what I thought was credible persons looking at the lake and looking at Chautauqua Lake. Now let me tell you what the two problems that pertain now are. Green algae is a serious problem. So what we're going to do with the Bowling Green guys is we're going to put some phosphorus testing devices at various spots, because I don't know how many years they've done this, but when I moved into our house in Bemis Point, there was a big iron pipe that went from the houses across the street into the lake. I had Bruce Johnson's son take that out, so it's not there anymore. But those houses on the other side of the lake dumped their sewage into the lake for years and years and years. Well, how that pertains is that a lot of the weeds that give the phosphorus, that generate the phosphorus, which is the thing that causes more weeds, are legacy weeds. So the question that these Bowling Green, well, it's the Lake Erie Center, it's 8 universities, but the principal investigator is one of my former colleagues at Bowling Green. What these guys are going to do is they're going to put sensors in various places around the lake and find out where these sources of phosphorus, as in where the sources of the growing new weeds are going to be, and then try to find out ways to mitigate that. Now, if it's dredging, well, that's one sort of level of requirement. If it's just causing the farmers at various spots to stop putting fertilizer in the lake, that's a completely different situation. But it may just be that it's stuff that's there from 100 years ago that is causing the incidence of weed growth at this stage. I've forgotten the numbers, but it's close to 60% of the phosphorus that's in the lake comes from that legacy, those legacy weeds. It sticks with my philosophy. I support excellence. If you're playing a game, you got to have the best players. Warefoots and Service and Erlandson and others, all those guys, first class. I really trust their opinion. They've done their homework. The materials they sent to the Department of Environmental Quality are, 2 feet thick, single paste, and that took an awful amount of work.